Good evening. I'm Kelly Wright. Thanks for joining us tonight. And I hope wherever you are that you're safe and well and that you're doing your best to take care of yourself and each other. Certainly in these unprecedented times, we need to do just that. My opening observations are this. George Floyd is a Black man who is now going to be remembered as hashtag I can't breathe. Another Black man taken out while in police custody. He was on the ground under a police cruiser, a police officer with his knee on his neck, handcuffed, and he's saying, "Help me, I can't breathe." And yet, the police officer, for 7 minutes in a disturbing video, never lifted his knee off the neck of George Floyd. And now he is dead. And people who have watched it, from the governor to the mayor and to Ben Crump, who is now the attorney who will be stepping in to represent the family of George Floyd, are saying this video is disturbing, it's shocking, but it also shows a callous disregard for life. And no police officer, no human being should display that kind of behavior. And being Black should not be a death sentence. And those are my opening observations. Let's look at the video, and it is quite disturbing. And here's the way it all unfolded. Police say that George Floyd, the deceased Black man, was allegedly involved in some sort of forgery and appeared to be under the influence before experiencing what they call medical distress. But the video you're watching shows a disturbing and horrible scene as George Floyd, another Black man similar to Eric Garner, clearly is in distress, crying out over and over, "Help, I can't breathe." As you look at this graphic video, others are reacting. For example, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz is among those demanding answers following the death of Floyd. The FBI and Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension are now investigating the incident as well, including any possible civil rights violations. And Governor Walz says the lack of humanity in this video is disturbing, it's sickening, and he explains we will get answers and seek justice. U.S. Senator Amy Klobuchar described the incident as horrifying and gut-wrenching, and is calling for those involved to be held responsible. She states every single person in every single community deserves to feel safe, adding, as the mayor of Minnesota noted, this tragic loss of life calls for immediate action. My first guest on the program tonight is Dr. Benjamin Chavis. He is the president and CEO of the National Newspapers Publishers Association, the Black Press USA. And Doc, good of you to join us tonight. And again, we're talking about another Black man, this time, again, reminding us of Eric Garner shouting or stating, "I can't breathe, please, I can't breathe, come on, please, I can't breathe." The video is disturbing, it's shocking, and it grieves me to see this happening again.
There appears to be in Minneapolis another manifestation of the epidemic of racially motivated police brutality amidst the pandemic of COVID-19. Both are shocking, both are terrorizing to Black America, but it should be shocking and terrorizing to all Americans, to all people. The video speaks for itself. And the duration of the policeman's knee on this Black man who's face down on the concrete, who's already handcuffed. So there's no resisting. The man is begging for his life. And so this is beyond needing better police training, Kelly. This is endemic, this is systemic to racism. Obviously, the police officers did not value this man's life. They took his life. And the video shows, if you play the whole video, it's about 10 minutes of video. where this man is literally begging for his life. He says, and similar to the words of Brother Garner, Ed Garner in New York, I can't breathe. I can't breathe. Please take your knee off my neck. I can't breathe. And of course, after minutes go by, he stopped begging because he couldn't breathe. He was dying. And by the time the ambulance got there and they put him on a stretcher, he was probably already dead. So now, I now understand that the FBI and other law enforcement agencies are investigating. But this is another clear-cut case of racially motivated police brutality.
And we're going to have an attorney on later today, our legal analyst, Terry Austin, whom you know as well. And she's going to weigh in on the constitutional rights that this man, unidentified man so far had. And what really shocks me is that the police, the way they treated this, the police chief there in Minneapolis basically stated, this man resisted arrest. That doesn't warrant getting to a point that you have a man already in handcuffs. There's no more resistance he can do. And your knee is on his neck for more than 5 minutes, at least 10 minutes, and people pleading with you, bystanders pleading with you, saying, give the man a chance to breathe. And even when the paramedics arrive,
exactly,
they don't remove that man. That officer did not remove his knee from that man's neck.
Well, I'm glad you're going to have Attorney Terry Austin on. She's great, and I'm sure she will give the legal analysis. I believe that the video exposes that this man was not resisting at the time that the knee was on his neck. He was already handcuffed. He's flat down. He's laying right under the tire almost of a police car. The man's not going anywhere. And so there's no justification from what we can see on the video. There's no justification for the police officer continuing to put his knee, and this is a big white police officer, big man, with his big knee on this brother's small neck. And it's wonder he didn't break the brother's neck. He's begging for his life. And there was no mercy shown. There was no concern shown. There was no concern that this is a human being laying on the ground in Minneapolis. So I'm calling, I know the Attorney General of Minneapolis, a former member of the Congressional Black Caucus. I'm calling on the governor and the Attorney General, the mayor of Minneapolis. This has to be, it cannot be left in the hands of the chief of police of Minneapolis. Federal authorities, where's the U.S. Justice Department? This is a civil rights violation. And as Dr. King, you know, we quote him all the time on your show, Kelly. Dr. King said, a threat, an injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And what happened in Minneapolis last night on Memorial Day night is a threat to justice all over America and a threat to justice all over the world.
And of course, we'll continue to follow this case. Dr. Ben, we appreciate you coming on the program to share your insights about this. And certainly it's something that we'll be examining quite closely because, you know, just one death is enough. And obviously we have a lot of questions that will be asked, and hopefully we'll get to the answers. We know that the FBI is investigating this case.
The Black press, absolutely. We're going to raise our voice. We're going to not leave no stone unturned. It's truly, truly tragic, and we have to do something about it now. Not tomorrow, but now.
Now is the time. Dr. Benjamin Chavis, thank you for being on the program today.
Thank you.
Joining me now is the Kelly Wright Show legal analyst, Terry Austin, and she's based in New York. But Terry, what we've seen unfold in Minneapolis with the death of George Floyd, as he's been named, is just felt everywhere for anyone who sees this and has a heart, they've got to be saying to themselves, oh my God, what just happened? How do you look at this as an attorney?
Kelly, this was very difficult to wake up to and to see literally a man being murdered in front of our eyes. It was very disturbing, and that is an understatement. When we look at these videos, they're all disturbing, but the reason this one is even more so is because you have an individual who's laying on the ground, he's handcuffed, he's face down, he's not even moving, and the officer for 5 to 7 minutes continues to put his knee on the individual's neck. You have individuals around the police officer begging him to please just remove your knee, let him breathe. And just like the Eric Gardner case here in New York, where I am, as you mentioned, he's saying, I can't breathe. So it's very disturbing. You see him there lying on the ground. There's blood on the ground and he's not moving. And yet the police officer doesn't remove his knee. I think it's murder. And I hope there is an indictment.
And as we've talked about, I was talking to a good friend of ours, Dr. Benjamin Chavis, as well in the previous segment. And we even pointed out the fact that as paramedics arrive and they begin to administer what looked to be like some medical help to the gentleman on the ground, what we saw is that the officer never removed his knee from the neck of the man who was handcuffed.
It's horrible, Kelly. And the fact that the police officer who had his knee on his neck did not stop putting pressure on the victim's neck, to me, is telling. And I do think there will be an indictment, at least I'm hoping so. In order to bring an indictment, you have to have probable cause. It is the lesser of all of the standards. You know that there is beyond a reasonable doubt and there's a preponderance of the evidence, but here, to bring an indictment, all you need is probable cause. And I think the video says it all.
Would that include both officers? Because the other officer is not turning back to his partner to render any kind of aid or even intervention. He's just dealing with a crowd of people who are saying, get off his neck, let him get up. He can't breathe.
I think if, in fact, we see an indictment of the officer who had his knee on the victim's neck, we will see charges. I think his name was Officer Cho, who was the individual who was taking care of the crowd, so to speak. I think we'll be seeing some charges against him. I don't think it'll be murder. I think it'll be something less, perhaps, because he didn't take part in it. But, you know, we could also see that he is also charged with murder only because he allowed the police officer to continue using excessive force. He did not intervene. And the crowd was saying, please do something, make it stop. And he did nothing.
Well, I think it's very clear what you said, though. The executive branch, the judicial branch, as well as the legislative branch, that means all members of Congress, the President of the United States, and even the Supreme Court needs to actually sound a very clear message to everybody and say, enough, let's stop this. Let's really get this right. Because here we are in the midst of a COVID pandemic, and yet we're still seeing that lives do not matter. It's just unfathomable to me that this officer who has his man down, handcuffed, is still keeping his knee on the back of his neck, and he's crying out, "Mama, I can't breathe."
I heard that, Kelly. When he did cry out, Mama, I think that is the ultimate sign of desperation. And he's literally pleading for his life. And it's brutality, and it's plain and simple, and it's all there on the video. And I really do hope that we have some justice in this case. The mayor actually said, even under COVID-19 circumstances, you can protest. And I do hope, I think there's a scheduled protest this evening. I do hope the protesters come out, they keep their distance, but they make their voices heard.
We will continue to follow the story. And you had talked about training and de-escalation coming up. I do have a guest who will be talking about that very issue, because he trains and talks to police chiefs and police officers around the country. So he will be coming in to weigh in on this outrageous, horrible, heartbreaking video that we're talking about right now. Terry Austin, our legal analyst, we thank you for being a part of the show and talking to us today. And a sad, heartbreaking day for those of us who have had to watch this. Terry, thank you.
Thank you so much, Kelly. Indeed. God bless.
Thank you. We'll be back with more after this. Welcome back to the program. So now I'm talking to Bobby Kipper, and Bobby Kipper is the founder of the National Center for Prevention of Community Violence. He's also the owner of the Kipper Group. He's a retired Newport News, Virginia police officer, and he has worked with the Bush administration at the Department of Justice, helping them maneuver through the intricate details of gang violence prevention. But basically, what I want you to know is that Bobby Kipper is a violence interrupter from both sides of the spectrum, from the law enforcement side as well as the criminal side. And Bobby, this case in Minneapolis is it's horrific video. It's
very sad.
Seeing this happen.
Kelly, it's very sad. And you know, when it brought to my attention this morning, I took a look at it because it's obviously fresh. Apparently, it just happened yesterday or yesterday evening. And I was sad looking at it. I was very sad for everyone involved, from their police department to their community. It's certainly, there are a lot of questions when I saw it.
A lot of questions and very few answers right now. I think what's really shocking to everyone is the fact that there were people actually pleading with the officer to get his knee off the man's neck, especially after the man was heard clearly several times mentioning, "I can't breathe. Come on, please, I can't breathe." It's as if he's, well, literally begging for his life, Bobby.
I would agree. Certainly nothing in that video I saw was applicable to any process that we've ever taught or that I've actually been through in police training. So it's almost like they go into a different zone. I don't know where this officer was, but we obviously teach de-escalation techniques to police officers all over the country. And one of the things that we emphasize is recovery, a recovery phase when an officer has someone in control, in custody, which this was, obviously. The gentleman was handcuffed. At that particular point, there's not force needed. That recovery phase has to take front and center. And unfortunately, I didn't see it in the video. And I think it's good that federal authorities are now looking at this and people outside of that police organization are looking at it, because I think that's very, very important, that they'll come under a microscope on exactly what process and what use of force was used in this situation.
But then there's also the racial part, Bobby. You know, a lot of people will say this is white supremacy, this is racism, this is bias, and our officers trained on that. And even though you train them, can you really get in and dissect what's going on and have them get to a level where there's respect for all life and all lives matter? It's a very tough thing, is it not?
It is extremely tough. And one of, you know, I've been asked about, you know, implicit bias training and those type of courses before. I don't really believe that one training or a 40-hour training block or a 2-day training block or a 1-day training block takes the bias out of people. I think one of my concerns about any type of training is we need to be driving solutions.
Mm-hmm.
And what are we doing in solutions? In other words, when you walk and you train people about being biased, the first thing you're doing is putting them on the defensive. You're certainly telling them that, you know, there's something wrong, and it's not really accusing them of racism, but it's hinting at the fact that that might be present within their character. And we all hear this all the time. We all hear where all of us are biased to a certain point. Well, that's true. We go back to the human side of this. If that's true, what are our solutions? And that's why we push programs like Actively Caring. And when we teach, our courses teach human rights training. These are not just issues of race, they're issues of human rights. what is human rights and dignity of all citizens. And so we like to make it sometime about, you know, color or nationality, but in reality, it's about the heart, it's about character, it's about people and their rights to exist in a society without this type of event.
Bobby Kipper, good friend of mine, as well as a law enforcement professional for 30 years, and now the founder and director of the National Center for the Prevention of Community Violence. Thank you for being on the program. I know this is a heavy issue, but we got to deal with it.
Always a pleasure, Kelly. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Bobby. God bless you.
You too. Bye-bye.
Back with more after this. Welcome back. My next guest is someone who's been working so hard for so many years to bring humanity together. His name is Bob Woodson. He runs the Woodson Center. It's an institute, if you will, of learning the fundamentals of how do we get along. He talks about our interconnectivity and our interrelatedness, and albeit from different perspectives, we all have different perspectives within the African American community. Bob, you were also head of the 1776 project. If you can, first of all, let me ask you how you're doing in this pandemic, this COVID-19.
Oh, I'm doing fine. We're staying active on the internet, having a lot of Zoom conferences with staff and grassroots leaders around the country. Again, keeping them motivated, keeping them in touch with one another. Oh, it's good, you know.
Good. Good. So you're safe and well, and you're keeping everything going. Tell me, if you will, how do you maneuver through this startling revelation that is, I say startling because it's startling to some, and yet to those of us who live within the African American community and other communities of color where health disparities have loomed large for so many years, we were not surprised by these inequities leading to some disproportionality in terms of people contracting the coronavirus. But how do you speak to the larger American audience to say we must deal with these systemic inequities that have caused these disparities that have adversely impacted populations within the African American community and the brown community?
Well, I think we make a basic mistake if we concentrate exclusively on inequities
Okay.
as a source of our problems. Inequities are challenges that come from outside. They are coming outside. There's always two sides of the issue. Is what is coming in from outside that is a challenge. But the other part is what are we doing inside in response to that challenge? That has been a challenge. This has been an important phenomenon in the African American community from the beginning. We had slavery, we had discrimination, but we were never defined by that which oppressed us. We were defined by our resilience, our ability to respond in creative ways to thrive in the face of oppression. And so, what we have been trying to do at the Woodson Center, since our base is low-income people of all races, all over the country, the Woodson Center helps them to develop strategies to overcome by calling upon their own resources within their community. In other words, we traffic in resilience and achievement against the odds. So we bring that understanding to this. We're saying that yes, there are inequities, but there are also actions that we can take ourselves to reduce the harm that is being done to us. In other words, and so what we do is we had a webinar where we had about 500 churches, Black churches, and grassroots leaders, and we spent the whole hour talking about what we can do to improve our life chances by not having parties, by practicing safe distances, by engaging in a group of Black pastors in Atlanta said, we ought to have our own payday protection program. If you go to a barber or a nail salon that's out of business, take the money that you would have spent and give it to them. So we can begin to look internally about how we can. But the main thing is self-discipline and personal responsibility as a part of our survival strategy.
I'm talking to Bob Woodson, the founder of the Woodson Center. And when we return, we're going to talk about those strategies to not only survive, but to overcome, and how we really should be looking at ourselves as African Americans. Back with more of Bob Woodson after this. Welcome back. So I'm talking to Bob Woodson, who has been championing the cause of not only self-identity and self-awareness, but also determining the self-propelling to greatness. And, Dr. Woodson, it's good to have you on because in many cases, sometimes we lose our identity as African Americans. We have allowed other people to define us. And because of that, we've looked at ourselves sometimes through the lens of being oppressed, when we really are champions who made it through. And like the song says, we've come this far by faith.
It's true. Most people are motivated to change and improve when you expose them to victories that are possible, not constantly reminding them of injuries to be avoided. To use a sports analogy, can you imagine if a coach said to players, well, the other team is bigger than they are, they're better practiced, they have better equipment, their coaches are better, they've been playing longer than we are, now get out on the field and do your best. When we constantly talk about racism or what happened in our past that serve as barrier today, that is the defeatist attitude. And so you shouldn't be surprised when people are being bombarded with these messages of what we can't do, that they don't do it. And so also we have to understand that just because there are disparities, it doesn't mean there's a presence of injustice. There's disparities in the number of Black men who are in the NFL, in the NBA. Black men are only about 6% of the population, about 80% of the NFL and the NBA. Well, then, is that racism or is that individual initiative? So I think it's a little more complex than always assuming that any differences that are negative can be attributed to forces outside, but any differences that are positive, we say it's individual initiative. So we need to think about these things.
Exactly. We do need to think about these things and then act upon it once we have a discussion. And having discussions like this, I think, is refreshing. What do we do when we see race enter into the picture of some of the unfortunate tragedies that we've seen? Ahmaud Arbery, a case where a young man is jogging, and he's chased down.
The very fact that we know his name means that the only time we seem to value a Black death, value a Black person is, or condemn it, is when it's taken by a white person. At the same time that Arbery was being killed, in Baltimore, 14 Blacks were killed in 7 days. In Milwaukee, Wisconsin, some years ago, a 5-year-old Black girl was sitting at dinner time on her grandfather's lap, and a bullet came through and blew her head off. We don't even know her name. But 23 Black children were killed in 6 months. But that's not a source of outrage. And so I'm not suggesting that Arbery's death, if it was done, regardless of what the motive is, try them, convict them, lock them up forever. But why is it that we can get upset, demonstrate, and raise hell when some white person takes a death? And if you look at the numbers, they're minuscule compared to the 6,000 Blacks who are killed by other Blacks every year. But we don't demonstrate about that. And so what statement are we making to ourselves and to the rest of society when everybody, celebrities, the president of the United States makes reference to a young man who was killed by two white thugs, probably racist. But why is that a subject of demonstrations and outcry when the daily slaughter of blacks by other blacks is almost taken as normal?
So what is the strategy then for how we get to a place where we look at ourselves and say we, and I've said this often in this show, must stop being our brother's killer and start really being our brother's keeper?
First of all, we need to put it in perspective. Yes, it is a horrible tragedy, but let's spend as much time lamenting the death of a 5-year-old girl sitting on her grandfather's knee. Put her picture on television. Have demonstrations in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, where it took place. Treat it as a national outrage, the way you do Aubrey's death. Every time that a black child is shot, 6-month-old baby, 9-month-old children being killed. When we can take pictures of these babies and parade them on television and hold up posters every time it happens and said enough is enough. That's when, but why we only do that when some white person does it. That's what it means, that we devalue black death when it's taken more often by another black, rather than waiting for some white person to kill one of them. It only happens on a handful of times, but we treat it as if it's an epidemic. Black on black crime is an epidemic. We killed more blacks in 1 year in America than was lynched in 50 years of the Klan.
Back with more Bob Whitson in just a moment. Welcome back. So we're having a very spirited discussion, lively discussion with Bob Whitson, the founder of the Whitson Center in Washington, D.C. And what served as your motivation or impetus to launch the Whitson Center?
Because I was a veteran of the civil rights movement in the 60s, and I realized that a lot of low-income blacks who suffered and sacrificed most did not benefit from the change. We picketed outside of Wright Laboratories in Westchester, Pennsylvania. And when they desegregated, they hired 9 black PhD chemists. When we approached these brothers and sisters and said, would you join the movement? They said, we got these jobs because we were qualified, not because of what you did. Well, that happened 2 or 3 times, and I decided I'm in the wrong struggle. And so I began to leave and work on behalf of low-income people of all races. I was active with the Native American people on Alcatraz to take that over. I was active with the farm workers in Delano, California, low-income whites in Dorchester, Pennsylvania, seeking tenants' rights. So I have devoted all my life to working on behalf of low-income people of all race. And part of what I'm trying to do is desegregate poverty.
And that is quite a task, to desegregate poverty, because many times when we look at poverty, we think it's just a black issue. And I've even had to educate white Americans on occasion that no, it's blacks don't lead in welfare. If you look at Appalachia, if you look at the real welfare lines, the really staggering number of those would be white. But the point is, what I think the point that you're stating is well said, is that all of us must have a seat at this table called brotherhood in order to do some good for the greater good of America and thereby the world. We do have to eradicate poverty, but we must see poverty as not having a color. We must see poverty from an issue and a standpoint of saying that we must do our level best to work together to represent those trying to get out of poverty.
And that's where our emphasis should be. And we ought to be able to do it without attacking one another. I don't get involved in debates. I like to have dialogue with people. I don't feel that I'm obligated to always disagree with everybody. And I don't think we need to be disagreeable in order to disagree.
Or if we do disagree, we must learn to disagree in harmony. And it's very difficult.
I think you can. Because if you have a serious argument, you ought to be able to make it in a logical way. And my goal is to convince people that what I'm saying makes a lot of sense. But I really believe I don't rely on ideology or politics to make my point. I rely on evidence.
Well, Bob Whitson, we appreciate you being on. You're never shy of having a conversation, and like you said, it's not really about debating; it's about having a dialogue. And certainly, I'm delighted to have you on to have a dialogue with me anytime. I know you have your critics. I know to your critics, you basically keep saying, "Keep talking. I'm going to keep acting."
I appreciate you, Kelly.
All right. Bob Whitson, good to see you as always. You're always welcome on this program.
All right, bye.
God bless you and stay safe. Welcome back to the program. Well, not everything going on in the world is bad. In fact, we can expect good news in a bad news world from my next guest, Pucci Colon. He is a renowned worship leader, and he mixes his praise and worship music with salsa. He has a new project coming out right now that a lot of people are anticipating with excitement. Pucci, it's good to have you on the program today from out there in beautiful Colorado Springs, Colorado.
Good to be on the program with you, sir. Kelly, so much. Thank you for having me, and always a pleasure to be able to just share and fellowship, even if it's through Zoom and all these different internet ways of getting and connecting and staying connected, which is very important. Thank you, sir.
Oh, it's good to have you, man. And look, you've stayed connected to your music, to your faith, all throughout this COVID-19 pandemic, and we're not out of it yet. But as you know, many states have reopened. And as a result of that, a lot of people are trying to get out and celebrate and just live life after having so much cabin fever. What has sustained you throughout this period?
Man, what sustained me has been ultimately staying connected to our Heavenly Father in prayer, in His Word, in worship, and staying connected with my family and even with our church, obviously as a distance, but just staying connected in the positivity of knowing that God is working on our behalf. And even though the news is saying whatever they want to say, ultimately, with all due respect, but to all those that are, but I just stay grounded in the word of the Lord and what He says. Mm-hmm. And so that's been our sustaining, our lifeline, for lack of a better way of saying it. And we've been able to get through, but we're praying for many people and staying connected to the Father and staying connected with people and see how we can help praying and however other ways we can help pray and lift people up and encourage them.
Coming on the show. And I want you to remind people that you didn't grow up having an easy life. You grew up in Trenton, New Jersey. And real quickly, if you can just share that with us about, how that toughened you and gave you, but not only toughened you, but gave you a heart of reaching out to help others in need.
Yeah, I grew up in Trenton, New Jersey. Those that are familiar with, at least that part of New Jersey, is not an easy, it's a difficult area. It's an urban city. It's the capital of New Jersey, but it's not a big city. And there was a lot of need. There was a lot of diversity, that's the reason I love Trenton, because you have African American, you have Latinos, you have white people, or not many, but they're there. You have a mixture, and I grew up around all that, which has made me really understand and love diversity, Kelly. God is a God of nations. God is a God of He created all the nations. And so we are to embrace, respect, and honor each other. And so I grew up in Trenton, and it wasn't easy, but man, it was a fun time. It gave me a lot of diversity, not only musically, but to respect and honor different cultures. And that reflected in my music. And that's, in fact, I didn't tell you this off the show, but I would like to share this. There's a song that's coming that I'm releasing very soon that I know called "What's Going On" from Marvin Gaye that he released in the 70s. And of course, I put a Latin rhythm arrangement to it, and we're doing it actually in Spanglish. For those that don't know what Spanglish means English and Spanish mixed. So that's coming soon, and man, and if that song is not relevant today, I don't know what is.
Poochie Cologne joining me on the Kelly Wright Show. And just tell me real quickly about your sons and this fantastic video that you did, because when we come back on the other side of the break, I'm going to close the show and we're going to play your son's Memorial Day tribute.
Yes, my three sons, Mikael, Joel, and Sammy Cologne, they wanted to, actually Mick and Joel wanted to do this song in honor of all the fallen heroes for Memorial Day. And so they came up with the idea. We have the studio here, we recorded it. They recorded it. I recorded it for them. I was behind the controls, and they recorded it, and then we wanted to do a video, because now every day everything is visual. And so we said, why don't we go over to the mountains and film it? And so that's how it all came about. And so I hope you enjoy it and able to share it. And thank you so much for having me.
But Poochie, you're always a friend here. Love having
Thank
you
you.
on the program each and every time. So come on back, especially with What's Going On. That's Poochie Cologne.
Yeah, definitely.
Love this guy. He's always welcome on this program. We'll be back with his sons and much more after this. Welcome back. I want to thank each and every one of you for taking time out to watch tonight. I appreciate you. And I hope you will appreciate this statement from the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. based on all that we've seen going on through COVID and, of course, these racially tinged cases involving Black men and women. He stated this: nonviolence means avoiding not only external physical violence, but also violence of spirit. You not only refuse to shoot a man, but you refuse to hate him. Certainly we can start there as we continue to ask questions and find the answers to all that's wrong with this world, but putting our trust in God and our faith to overcome fear and our hope to overcome despair. Hopefully you've been righted, ignited, and united to keep spreading love, freedom, and peace. That will save us all. We'll leave you now with Poochie Cologne and his sons. Good night.
I worship you. I worship you. You are here.